saw this video and I'm sick of people acting like the economy's not in a ridiculously bad state, so let's watch it.
This truck is $85,000. This truck is $90,000. And I'm a used car dealer, and here at these car auctions, we're seeing auto loan delinquencies and repossessions spike.
100%.
What's up, guys? John here.
I saw a statistic the other day that said that something like 20% of people who make over $100,000 a year are now behind on their bills or something along that nature. It could have even been a higher percentage than that. I think that it's unbelievable that people are trying to deny the fact that things have gotten really bad monetarily for a lot of people. We've talked before on this channel about the way that the money makes it look like that businesses are doing really well because stock prices of businesses are way up, but that's because centralized banks are creating debt for people and then using that debt to buy stock. So it has nothing to do with the overall state of the economy. And the fact is that I think more people than ever are struggling. Prices have gone up almost 100% on almost everything in the past 4 years. And wages have not gone up that much. Your bills are now higher than ever. Your interest rates are out of control. It's brutal out here, and people are having their cars repoed constantly because of it. I can't tell you how many people I've seen posting about how they're behind on stuff.
Millions of Americans are opting out of car ownership, giving the keys back to lender. They can no longer afford these payments.
Americans now falling behind on their car payments.
The average monthly payment for a new vehicle right now is $750.
That's a lot of money. $750, that's what I pay on rent every single month.
Oh no.
And I'm a lucky person with that. These units, I only pay $750 a month because I have been here for 8 years now, something like that. These units now are $1,300.
$47,000.
And I live in a city where the average income is nothing, dude. I mean, people around here, when they have a $40,000 a year job, say they have a good job. Let that sink in.
This little unit.
Where are they going to put them? Where? There's nowhere. No empty spaces.
Dude.
It is full to the brim.
And look, $85,000 that's getting out of hand.
This is sort of the overcorrection too, right? A lot of people during the pandemic were unable to get a vehicle because there was so little production going on. You guys remember all those empty car lots that were happening. So the people who were getting vehicles were getting ridiculous rates and buying them way over market value. So then because of that, they have these super high payments. The economy has this weird backlash thing where there's less money coming out and less scarcity at the same time. And then all of a sudden, you still have these giant payments, but everything else has increased in price, and you were maybe at the tip of your budget anyways whenever you were buying that vehicle. And now you're struggling to make these payments, and those cars get repoed, and now those cars are all lining all of these lots, and no one's buying them because nobody has the money to buy a car right now.
And the consumer right now,
The
with
cycle
everything
of
costing
it.
so much, they are not able to keep up with their payments. So what happens? They lose their cars.
These are the places that you're not going to hear about on the mainstream media, but are just
100%.
completely going out of business, and by default, those people lose their jobs.
And if you're wanting to buy one of these big SUVs or nice trucks right now, it's not going to be anywhere close to $750 a month. You're going to have to pay way more than that.
Yeah.
$118,000, folks. 118 grand.
Bro, and I'll tell you what, the way that this vehicle is a status symbol for people, the way that people get a big boy job where they're making 50 grand a year, and they immediately go out and take a $1,000 a month payment out on a big truck, especially around here, that happens all the time. I mean, the status of having a big truck is a real thing around here. And I've seen tons of people who have no food to eat, their house is in disrepair, but they got a big old truck they drive in, and they got to work 80 hours a week to pay for that, and they're side by side, man.
Wow. No words. Clearly, the market is broken.
This truck right here is $96,000. So check this out.
I can't imagine. The other day I had this thought too. So I have a RAV4 that I drive around in, and I saw someone driving around in an Audi, and they were coming out of a turn, and they were going so slow. Just, you could tell they were just so particular about the way they were turning their car. And I thought to myself, man, I never want to have a vehicle that I can't drive the way I drive this RAV. I drive the RAV like I'm in Fortnite just going, just popping over stuff, just doing whatever. It is what it is, man. It's a car. It gets me from place to place. I take care of it. But I don't feel the need to baby it because it's not so much money that I'm worried about something terrible happening to it, because I know that I'm probably not going to do anything terrible to it. But to people who own an Audi and they feel like this is their baby now, that they have to keep it in mint condition and everything, like, I never want a car to feel like that for me. I never want to have that sort of mentality. If I'm driving a Lamborghini, I want to drive that thing like I don't care if I have it next month. That's the only way that I want to feel about a vehicle. Now, I like to take care of my vehicles. I keep them clean and I do all those things. I totally understand protecting your investment and all of that, but this kind of babying that you see people do to these vehicles that are driven as bulletproof CIA vehicles, Mercedes that are military grade, and they're out here treating them like they're the most fine Swiss watch that if one grain of sand gets inside of it, the whole thing's going to go to shit. I don't ever want to be that person.
This is a full row of $80,000 and $90,000 F-150s.
That is getting out of hand.
There are so many auto loan delinquencies in the system right now that there are not enough tow truck drivers to service all of these lending institutions to get their cars back. And
New meta, dude. Everyone's going to be like, oh, go be a tow truck driver. Tow truck drivers get paid so much money. Yeah, dude. I can't stand whenever people try to give one-size-fits-all solutions to a problem. There might be a market for tow truck drivers right now, just like there was a market for whatever there was 4 years ago, probably selling vaccines, if I had to make a guess. But now this will sort itself out, and then your job will just be one that had a whole bunch of people go into it because everyone was told it was a good idea.
possessed cars are the worst of the worst. They're dirty. They're nasty. They have parts falling off of them because the consumer knows if they're going to lose their car, why take care of it?
And I personally think we're going to walk into the biggest auto loan and auto market crisis we have ever before seen.
Yeah. The other big thing I'm noticing at the moment is just seeing big dealerships disappearing. As soon as
we're heading for really difficult times, I think, and I know that I'm somewhat cynical at times, and I try to control for that in my thinking because I know that I have a cynical ideology sometimes. My mom's someone who says, "Oh, your doctor was really thorough when you were young," and I'm someone who thinks, "No, my doctor was trying to milk us for money because we had health insurance and you were a concerned parent." So I know that I'm a cynical person, but I do think we're heading for bad times. I can't see how this rights itself. I've never seen things in the economy go back down to the levels that they're supposed to be. I've only seen them slowly climb higher and higher. And it might look like that, but they continue to go up over time. They don't go back down. And that worries me because I don't think that you're going to see people... I don't think you're going to see minimum wage go up to $25 an hour. I don't think that the American public is willing to let that happen because they feel like it takes away from them in some kind of way.
The values of cars came down, there just isn't the money left there anymore, and they're all defaulting and having to go through a bankruptcy.
So prices are so high that consumers are having to push out their loans to 72, 84 months to even be able to afford any of these vehicles.
It's a crisis,
But look, this is a Wrangler 4-door Sport 4x4, $66,000. That's absolutely lunacy. Clearly, the whole Canadian market is upside down. Vehicles are not selling. There's way too much inventory.
Ford Mavericks that you couldn't find anywhere. Look behind me. There are 9 of them sitting here for sale. Dealerships, even the Ford Maverick, stuff that was so hot that you couldn't find anywhere, is still, right now, sitting on dealership lots, not selling.
In 2022, CNBC reported that inflation was costing the average family $433 a month. Then, the next year, $790.
How many people have $433 extra a month to spend on inflation? That's the thing that I think about all the time. This is in the best case scenario budget. That is the extra money you have every month to put into savings. In the best case scenario budget, $433 a month. You're talking 10% of the average household income, something like that, a little bit less perhaps. $709, definitely over 10% of the income being, and people don't have 10% of wiggle room in their budgets. 10% is considered to be the margin that you have for savings a lot of times. This is where that money is going to come from. You're going to see a lot of people losing their savings. I've seen tons and tons of posts on social media that have said things along the lines of, I had $34,000 in savings in 2020, and now I have $100 in savings. I had $70,000 in savings at the beginning of 2020, and now I have $5,000. Things are getting bad, and I think that the people out there who are trying to make it sound like, oh, you're just making excuses, blah, blah, blah. Dude, I promise you that's not what's going on. Wait for it.
$1 a month. Now they're saying it's $11,000 a year, almost $1,000 a month.
I think that the only people who say that you're just making excuses are people who are having an extreme run of luck right now.
And it's no wonder why the American consumer is having such a hard time right now. The average American doesn't have $500 in their savings account for an emergency. So it's so bad right now, even the most affordable vehicles on these dealership lots have to be marked down because people can't afford them. See right here, this says was $38,000, but after your rebates, after your discounts, now they're selling it for 30 grand, and they still can't move these things. And even though
this is another thing that I think is going on right now. Companies are trying to move stock. They have a lot of stock sitting around, and anyone who's ever run a business, you know that stock sitting is one of the worst case scenarios that you can have. If your products aren't selling at market and they're sitting around, your value as a company is going to drop dramatically. If you have a bunch of Ben & Jerry's ice cream, I'll talk about this. If you have a bunch of Ben & Jerry's ice cream and that Ben & Jerry's ice cream is sitting on the shelf for a really long time gathering frost on it, eventually people are going to be less willing to buy that product. That product is going to be considered waste, and then people are going to have to order less Ben & Jerry's ice cream from Ben & Jerry's whenever they're putting in their orders. So then Ben & Jerry's is selling less ice cream. So then they aren't making as much profit. And because they're not making as much profit, they don't need as many people. Carl, you can't be up here, buddy. I love you, but you scratch me up. Because Ben & Jerry's isn't making as much profit, they have to lay people off. When they start laying people off, and it's not because they don't have the profit to do it. It's because if you're a company that's hemorrhaging money and you have a bunch of employees who don't have anything to do because you're not making as much ice cream as you used to be making, and you don't need that labor anymore, the obvious thing to do is to lay people off. But then people lose their jobs, they get behind on their payments, they default on their loans, their cars get repossessed, they get taken to a car lot. The car lot can't sell the cars because people are losing their jobs and they don't have money to buy the cars. The car lots start to go out of business. The car lots go out of business. People aren't able to buy vehicles from a car lot anymore because there aren't any more car lots. And it's just a snowball of a problem that goes all the way down. And the idea of stop making excuses. Okay, dude, let's not find a solution then. Let's not think about this problem. Let's bury our heads in the sand and let's just let everything go bad. Cool, let's do it your way.
$3,000 and
people just don't want to think, dude.
$3,500 cars sitting on my lot. We are still slow. 2 months ago, we would have been incredibly busy with those kind of prices.
So companies are trying to move stock, is what I'm trying to say.
But we're seeing that the demand from the consumer is drying up. Even for $3,500 cars, people cannot afford to buy them right now. So right here, here's how we know it's bad. This Ford Explorer, the MSRP, is $46,000. But now they have it discounted, advertised, they have it discounted for $39,000. This has not happened in the last 3 years. That's where a dealership is actually advertising under MSRP on their lot. This hasn't been happening. You know it's bad when these dealerships are coming out and advertising under MSRP.
Look at these
10% off on a car is unheard of.
Diesels, you got dualies, regular cabs with single rear wheels, and look, let's take a quick look and get an idea. $118,000.
Think about this.
And Canada's the country, man. You know, it's the countryside. So anywhere that's the countryside, trucks sell, dude. People care about having a big truck. That's important to them.
Tesla cutting prices. I mean, you could buy a Tesla Model 3 now for under 20 grand. Under $20,000, there's hundreds of them available.
That's wild.
They're cutting prices. They're trying to offload this inventory.
Yep.
And now, as a used car dealer, we are also struggling because what we have is we have decreased inventory coming to these auctions because the new car dealers aren't selling them. So the more strapped the consumer is, the less they're able to buy from new car dealers, the fewer trade-ins they're able to get to these new car dealers, the fewer vehicles they are actually able to get to me to bid on at these auctions.
Car owners are trying to get rid of these cars. Dealers and lenders trying to get rid of these cars. How many people are looking to buy a car today with a 14% interest rate? Buying a $47,000.
And this is the knock-on effect that I'm talking about, man. When products that people bought once in a while as a treat thing, Ben & Jerry's, it was $4 for a pint of ice cream. You're talking $7.50, $8 a pint for ice cream now. That was a thing that, you know, maybe once a month or so, or you know, if you're someone who really likes Ben & Jerry's, maybe every 2 weeks, maybe more than that, you're spending your money on that thing. When it gets to a point that you pick up a pint of Ben & Jerry's and the sticker shock is so much that you go, never mind, and then it doesn't sell anymore, that's a problem. Whenever people are surviving, and they are surviving off of the cheapest things that they can get their hands on. I mean, I saw an article that said that the biggest splurge for millennials is groceries, just staple foods to stay alive off of. And I get that. My food budget is strict, and I have a hard time making it month to month from times. And so when this becomes the economy, when you don't have money floating around on these frivolous things, you don't have money exchanging hands because people don't have that spare change anymore, you run into all these knock-on effects. This is what causes layoffs. It's not corporate greed. Corporations are run in a way that they can see the future pretty well. They know what's coming, and they have to make decisions to keep themselves going. It's what businesses do. That's how industry works. And so we're running into a situation where we don't know what to do. We have no idea how to make this turn around and go the right way.
On a car with a 14% interest rate, looking at about $1,000 a month, plus car insurance and gas, $1,500 a month. It's not going to happen. Not for the average person.
And it's not just the consumers and these car dealers that are getting hurt. These auction companies are getting hurt too. See this whole line right here. It is empty. It's empty because these new car dealers are not able to sell vehicles. They're not able to get these trade-ins. So this auction can't run what they normally run. This row is typically filled with cars, with trade-ins, and they're not here. So these auction companies are also suffering right now.
What's shocking, though, is 2007, 2008, everyone remembers the great financial crisis.
And you hear so many people use this term like, well, they just need to give all their money. They just need to give all their money away. No, that's not a good plan. If you broke up all of the wealth of all of the richest people in America and they just gave it to all of us, I mean, you might get 5-10 years of living off of that. But if that's the standard and there's no movement economy, if there's no new wealth being created, if you're not in a world where there's enough money floating around that you can get some of your hands on it, if you're an industrious person, and there's no life for you to have long term. There's no answer in that. Just giving wealth away is not going to fix the problem. Now, if we set up infrastructure and we change dramatically our whole way of existing and living, and we stop being so hyper competitive, and we work together and did all that could be really good and could work. But I was an idealist when I was young. I think a lot of people are. And I still, in my heart, wish that things were the way that we all know that they should be. But they're not. And I don't think sitting around and having everyone kumbaya wish their way is going to make things better. I think that change is brutal and difficult, and I think it takes working your way in from the inside and figuring out new ways to do things, educating yourself to the point that you're someone who can be a player in this world and trying to get somewhere to where you can make changes. And I just don't believe that everybody wishing something was a different way makes it that way. You cannot bend the laws of reality to fit what your ideals are. Now, I wish it wasn't that way, but I believe in that statement of you want it to be one way, but it's the other way. And that's just how it is. If things aren't the way you want it to be, you can't just wish them to be different.
Is that 1929-like event, Average used car was about $8,000.
That doesn't mean you should give up, though. Just, you should keep pushing. Do better. Work hard. Figure out what's important to you. Try to help other people. Do good in this world. But sitting around and saying that communism is the way just isn't going to do anything.
Average used car is about $8,000. Now, you're looking at 4 times that amount. The average home back then was $246,000. The average home today is about $420,000. Food prices have tripled. Everything has gotten out of control, yet real wages have barely moved.
Yeah.
You look at all these new spending bills.
They moved briefly during COVID. The restaurant that I used to work at, I mean, $11 an hour being a manager when I was working there pre-2020, so 2019, right up into the end of right up into the middle of 2020 when the pandemic popped off. They were hiring people during 2021, 2022, I want to say around $14, $15 an hour, especially if you had worked there before. But I think those numbers have gone back down to $10, $11, $12 an hour.
Bills, all this new money that's being sent overseas, we're going to see inflation get a lot worse, and I believe we're going to start to see more auto loan delinquencies. You know, we're already at a 30-year high than we've ever before seen. It's coming very, very, very soon.
Very quick.
You look at Google Trends, type in voluntary repossession over the last 20 years, and you'll see where we're actually headed. And the reason for this is inflation is crippling the average family.
And a lot of times people are...
And everyone's so unaware of what inflation is. You see so many people using the term Bidenomics. And now, while I will admit that things are significantly worse economically right now, it's so difficult for me to understand, and I don't think anyone really does, whether or not the market that we're in right now is directly caused by the people who are in power, or if it's knock-on effects from choices that were made over the past 8 years. I do agree that the economy was better under Donald Trump. That's something that I think that we all can agree upon, that it is underneath Biden. But is that because Donald Trump's spending during his presidency, the bills that he signed into effect, and the ways that he gave money out, and the things that he did during his presidency? Now, I think it was super important to do that. I think that was a necessary thing. You had layoffs like you had never seen in America. People needed their income supplemented. $200 maximum for unemployment was ridiculously low. Getting that extra $600 a month was really, really important for a lot of people. It changed my life in a lot of ways and set me on a path that I wouldn't have been able to get on if it wasn't for that. And I'm super grateful for that. But the economy could be in the state that it's in because we tripled our debt over the course of the past 4 years during that giant pandemic period. So is it really Biden's fault? I don't know. That's a complicated question that has a lot of nuance behind it, and I just roll my eyes whenever I see someone just blaming the president for anything. Same thing with Donald Trump. Whenever anything was going wrong and people were I just don't think that they wake up in the morning and flip a switch that says what the gas prices are. I think it's a lot more complicated and nuanced than all of that.
Electing not to buy these late model or brand new vehicles because they're too expensive. Even with some of the incentives, it's just not worth it.
And car dealers, especially used car dealers, are so pinched right now that we're even seeing their cars get repossessed. Yes, car dealers can get their cars repossessed. They owe money on their vehicles that they have sitting on their lot. So if they don't sell them, then the lending institution can literally go to their car lot, pick up their car, bring it here, dump it, and then that car dealer is on the hook for the difference.
Hey Brandon, so as we all know, layoffs have been pretty rampant since the beginning of 2024. In fact, one of the biggest layoffs that we have seen as of recent history has been the one with Tesla, where they just laid off 14,000 workers.
Right.
And as you can see on this chart from layoffs.fyi, the tech layoffs over the past couple of years have been absolutely massive.
Yeah, tech is in a really interesting position right now. So, basically over the past 40 years, tech seemed like an industry with no ceiling. It seemed like it was going to constantly go up and 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 up. And that as data became more readily available through different applications, that the income that you could drive through that data would be astronomical, and companies like Twitter were being valued at these insane high values, even though they had never turned any kind of profit. And tech was thought to be the golden industry for a long time. And I, as someone who is in school right now for software engineering, I love tech. I'm glad that I'm going into tech. I'm glad that I'm learning more about this field, but I don't think that it's a place that you're going to be able to go and get a 6-month certification for and then get a $100,000 a year job. I don't think that's going to happen ever again. I think that we're done with that now. You have to be somebody who really knows what they're doing and understands these concepts in a deep way to enrich your life with, and that might not look like going and getting a job anymore. And this is something that really scares people, but I don't know that jobs are going to exist for a super long time. I think that the idea of a job, of getting a wage for working for somebody else, is something that really only showed up in the past 150 years. And that's going to slowly work its way back out. And we're going to go more towards this sort of freelancy, existing, making yourself valuable and earning your own way by doing that sort of economy.
And all these cars that you're seeing behind me right now, this is a sign of a strapped consumer. What are all these? These are all repossessed vehicles. These are all individual consumers that could not make their monthly payments on these vehicles. So they stopped. And when they stop doing it, they're going to lose their car. And we're seeing this across the market, an uptick in auto loan delinquencies, credit card delinquencies, and now repossessions. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. And what's crazy is I literally just had a conversation with my sales manager, and he's telling me, look, Brandon, we can't buy cars that we have to sell for $4,500 anymore because people cannot buy them. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to bring back our range. Even me, a car dealer that sells cars that are $5,000 and under, I have to bring my range down now because people don't have the money to buy these cars. It's so bad that my sales manager is saying, Brandon, we are dead. We can't buy these cars that people cannot afford anymore. And the cars that he's talking about that they can't afford, they're $4,500.
Yeah, they're not luxury
people can't
vehicles.
afford $4,500 cars anymore. So I just want to give you the grand scale of this. We have a full row of trucks, another full row of trucks, full row of trucks, full row of trucks. And if we keep on going over here, these are actually SUVs, but there are like 3 or 4 or 5 more rows full of vehicles. Now, I've been to this dealership a lot in the last year. I have never seen it this stacked full of vehicles, and it's because it's not just Ford, and it's not just this dealership's fault. It's because the American consumer cannot afford to buy these vehicles, so they're not, and they're stacking up at dealerships, and dealerships are now having to turn down allocations.
So what do you do? That's the question that this brings about. What do you do to fix this? And the answer is I don't really know. I'm not somebody who is here to fix these problems. I'm not an elected official that you've put in power who's supposed to keep things running the way that they are promised to be running. But what I do know is that if people sit around and say things like, nothing is wrong, you need to pull yourself up harder, work more, get more hours, these things that aren't true, nothing will get done because the people who have the power to make changes and who are supposed to be thinking of how to solve these problems know that they can keep their jobs easily by just pretending like everything's hokey-dory. And the longer we let them do that, the deeper this hole is going to be dug, and a lot of them are going to die before shit hits the fan.
Because where are they going to put them? Where? There's nowhere. No empty spaces. It is full to the brim. So another massive problem that I'm hearing
I've never seen a world where people simp for politicians the way that they do now.
Franchise GMs is that customers are coming in with so much negative equity.
But Americans do that thing where we see ourselves in people who are way more successful than us, because in America, there is the possibility of dramatic movement in your wealth. In a lot of other countries where you're born at, it's kind of where you're going to stay. There's not a whole lot of room for improvement in that way. But here, you can go from making $30,000 a year to being a multimillionaire if you just happen to be at the right place in the right time. So people see themselves in those people, so they don't think of the ruling class as being a villain or not a villain. That's not even the right way to put it. Just someone who is different than them. They see them as being themselves, so they give them all this kind of leeway that you give to yourself.
that they can't trade them up and trade them out of their current vehicle because they owe too much on it. So typically what would happen is most consumers would have negative equity on their vehicles and would be able to trade in every 3 to 4 years and just roll that negative equity into their new vehicle. But now, because the negative equity is so high, they're not able to do that anymore. And this is hurting.
When you buy a car now, you kind of have to keep it until you've paid off your loan and then just drive that car until it's dead.
Sales for a lot of these franchise dealers, and they're really worried about it because people.
There were also a lot of lemons manufactured between 2010 and 2016.
Owe too much on these cars that they paid way too much for, and the banks allowed them to do it.
Yeah.
This car market in Canada is absolutely ballistic, and people aren't buying. Cost of living's too high, and as you can see,
it's another problem when there's an influx of a lot of cash in the economy, is that people get really scammy because they want to get their hands on as much of that cash as possible. So bankers got in a lot of trouble for this in 2008 because they were doing this exact same thing, but with home loans back in the day, and then that caused the economic crash of 2008. But whenever there's a lot of money floating around currently, they know, they have really good prediction models that things are going to take a turn. Bubbles pop. That's what bubbles do. And so when there's all that extra money, they're trying to get as much of it as they can before the bubble pops, and they do really shady business practices, things that aren't even necessarily legal.
Even with some incentives on trucks, SUVs, cars, and that's every brand, they're still not selling. But this just doesn't begin and end here. Clearly the whole Canadian market is upside down. Vehicles are not selling. There's way too much inventory. A lot of it has to do with a lot of the markups. Yes, we've seen some incentives here recently, but you know, honestly, look at even base models like this right here. We have a Jeep Wrangler. This is more or less just a sport 4x4, and of course 4 doors. It doesn't even have much for features. Plastic here, and look, even this goes for a whopping $65,000. That's pretty typical.
Totally.
Even
Jeeps
little
are
SUVs like
expensive
this
vehicles.
Jeep Compass right here, great little units.
I mean, anyone who's ever been poor in their lifetime knows which vehicles are cheaper and which ones aren't, right? If you want something really bottom of the barrel, you get an entry-level Chevy model. It's probably not going to last you a long time, but that's a really cheap vehicle that you can usually get. I don't know what the car prices are like now, probably $20,000 or something. Back in the day when I bought my first vehicle new, it was $14,000, I think is what I paid for a Chevy Sonic. It was like 2011 or 12, 2013 actually. And you know, Jeeps are definitely more expensive cars. Fords are more expensive cars. Toyotas are sort of in between everything. Subarus are sort of in between everything. And then you start getting into higher end stuff, BMWs, Mercedes, that kind of stuff that's going to cost you quite a bit more.
Fun, but honestly, there was a day when this vehicle was 25, 30 grand.
Yeah.
But even this here is a whopping $47,000 for this little SUV.
Everything's more expensive.
So me as a used car dealer, I can see at these car dealer auctions the
and these guys are trying to tell you how wages should be increased with the cost of this stuff. That's the only quick fix that I can think of, is you just dramatically increase people's wages, and you just deal with the layoffs that are going to have to occur from dramatically increasing people's wages. You put minimum wage up to $15 an hour. You give everyone across the board a $7 an hour raise to go above that. And maybe that does something. I don't know. You're going to have an inflationary effect from that, but at least it kicks the can down the road a little bit. Maybe we just need to suffer it out. I'm not sure.
That all these dealers are feeling. We see it in the form of no sales. Dealers that traded, they gave too much money for these vehicles. Now they're trying to unload them to other dealers, and the money's not there. We're seeing repos.
And as someone who runs a small business, I see this all the time. I call card shops. So we make this product it's a bar of soap, and it has a full set of dice inside of it. So D4s all the way up to D20, and it's shaped like a dragon egg, and that's a really big product in card shops. So I call card shops that sell dice and miniatures, and I say, hey, I have this product, blah, blah, blah. They go, wow, that's really amazing. Let me order those from you. And over the past year, calling those card shops, the amount of people who are saying, man, I just don't have the money right now. I just, maybe in 2 months or maybe in 3 months, but Magic the Gathering's releasing all these new sets, and I got to buy those, and it's the only thing that's selling right now, and blah blah blah, all this stuff. It's different out there. People are not spending money the way they used to.
Spike up here at auctions. People are not paying for their cars. what we're seeing too is that we're seeing fewer and fewer cars come through the auction. And that means that new car dealers are not selling, because what we get here at these auctions are trade-ins. And if we're not seeing a lot of trade-ins come to the auction, that means new car dealers are not selling.
So what we really have to focus on is middle America and people that don't have these high-paying tech jobs.
Yeah.
And that's where we can see the latest layoffs and store closings from daily job cuts.
Yep.
There are many different places across the country that are just folding up shop and closing down.
Yep.
You know, little bakeries like in New Jersey, and donut cafes in South Carolina.
Tons of people who started businesses during COVID to try to give themselves another way are now closing up. That's something that I've noticed as well. We've been operating for 9 years, something like that now, 8-9 years. We're going to be okay. we have it running the way that we need to. It's our only source of income. We do what it takes to make ends meet, but for a lot of people, that's just not the way that it is anymore. I mean, if you look at, there's a bakery around here that's been posting lately about how times are really bad, and they're almost going into more scammy tactics to try to get people to come in and purchase stuff, ripping off other people's products, doing things like that. I mean, it's cutthroat right now.
Furniture companies in Georgia. These are the places that you're not going to hear about on the mainstream media, but are just completely...
I'm not trying to give you anxiety. That's not what I'm attempting to do here. But if you're somebody who sits around and thinks, oh, people are just complainers, people just aren't... I'm trying to convince you that you need to take a look at what's actually happening in the world around you and leave behind some of this rhetoric that you've adopted from politicians or from your social groups or whatever, and just sort of have a perspective that there is something going on here. I am not someone who has any stake in taking an easy way out. I've never been able to do that. I've had to work hard for everything that I have. My life is extremely busy. I am a tired individual who puts in hours above and beyond what's called for me because I'm terrified that things are going to go wrong in the future, and that's who I am. I feel strongly that hard work is one of the most important things that you can do in this world. It has nothing to do with your economic standing. It has to do with who you are as a person, that getting yourself to work hard is the most valuable thing that you can do as a human, because it gives you the most human experience in the time that you have on this earth. And that's the thing that you need to be striving for. So coming from me, things are bad. I know I have long hair. I know I'm a kid or whatever, but just listen to me on this. Things are not what you think they are. Truly, I believe that.
Going out of business, and by default, those people lose their jobs. And those are the kinds of people that are probably levered up with the most debt, and if they lose their job, most likely cannot afford to make their debt payments, including their car payment.
All right, I want you to see something else. See all these cars all behind me right here? So this auction's light on the franchise dealer side. We actually have more independent dealers. All these cars that you're seeing around me, more independent dealers than what we're seeing franchise dealers at this auction right now.
That's wild.
And why that's interesting is because these independent dealers, all these cars are most likely not going to be trade-ins. They're going to be stuff that dealers need to unload. They've got on their floor plans, their credit lines. And they need to get rid of them. You have some wholesalers here. You have cars here that they're not going to sell on the retail level for whatever reason, whether it's they're junk, there's money that they don't want to actually put into the car, so they're just going to dump them off to another dealer. They can't sell them on their lot for whatever reason, so they have to get them off their credit lines, or they're trying to really just do some quick flips. Either way, it's interesting because you almost never see more independent dealers at an auction than you see franchise dealers. So it's very telling for the market that we're seeing that these franchise dealers can't sell, and these independent dealers are wanting to turn quick money.
Yeah.
Because if they didn't want quick money, then they would be selling them on their actual lots, because they can make more money on their lot than they can by bringing it here to the auction and dumping it. It's very telling. Independent dealers want to get rid of their cars. Franchise dealers
people want to move stock right now.
Hi, Brandon. It's Joe from the Shifting Metal YouTube channel and your old mate from over here in the UK. The state of the market over here currently is a bit of a volatile one. There's absolutely loads to talk about with our car finance industry at the moment as well. Not only is there absolutely loads of default cars going through the auctions, people not managing to keep up with their payments, and they're getting repossessed and put through the auctions. I'm seeing loads of those and buying up quite a few myself. We're also seeing a massive uptick in people trying to just reject their car through their finance company, saying it's not fit for purpose or whatever, even well after there's any kind of comeback for the dealer. In fact, I had it happen to me on a Porsche 911 that was 12 months after they bought it.
So something funny to think about right now is that Jim Farley, these other CEOs of the big three right now, I think that they might start trying to get in cahoots with Sean Fain of the UAW, because they might need to have more strikes. This production's got to stop, and they got to figure out a way to blame it on somebody else. The union was an easy way to do it back last year, so maybe that we bring that back around. Jim Farley, you need to send a nice handwritten letter to Sean Fain saying, you know what, you guys, I think you need a little bit more money. Let's shut down these plants for just a little bit so we can let these dealers catch up. That's what we need right now.
Yeah.
Now that even dealerships like
And I like this guy. This guy has some interesting takes that's very telling of the way that he feels, and I feel the same way. I'm at heart a tinfoil hat wearing conspiracy theorist. That's probably true, but I do that because I think that it's logical, and I see a lot of sense in what he's saying. Things do not happen by accident. Usually, and I learned this because I grew up in churches, usually when you have a large group of people who are being led by other people, the people who are leading them are doing things, and they're calling to action without giving the full disclosure of why it is. It's manipulation. That's what people do. People aren't thinking very hard about things because they can only devote 4% of their thought to this thing. It's a part of their life, not their whole life. And for some people, it's their entire life, so they can devote a lot of their thinking to it. It doesn't have a lot to do with intelligence. It has a lot more to do with the time available to think about the thing. And so the people who it's their whole life, who are in power, who are doing those things, those people are the ones who are controlling situations. And usually when a strike happens, it's not for what you think it's for.
And repossessed cars are the worst of the worst.
People are stepping down.
But it's a good video. I like this video a lot. Go and give the video a like. Core questions answered. I've never seen this channel before, but they got 230K subs. They're doing a good job out here. Go and like the video, guys. Dangerous times out here in the economic situation of America, and apparently everywhere else too.